Gran honor y una alegría presentar a nuestros grandes colegas que han venido especialmente desde Polonia para la ocasión, así que les quiero pedir a todos un gran aplauso. Ahora Małgorzata Ludwisiak, que está en el centro, gran amiga, colega, a quien admiro muchísimo y en virtud de la admiración que tengo por ella es que la he invitado a este diálogo y Małgorzata ahora se va a presentar. Simplemente decir que hoy en día es curadora independiente con una enorme trayectoria, dirigió varios museos en Polonia, fue la directora artística del Museo Arte Moderno de Varsovia.
Museo Moderno, Arte Moderno de Varsovia.
Decía, en virtud de mi enorme admiración por Małgorzata Ludwisiak, quien es una enorme colega, querida amiga, gran historiadora, dirigió varios museos, hasta hace poco directora artística del Museo Arte Moderno de Varsovia y hoy es curadora independiente. La invité a un diálogo el año pasado, hemos estado trabajando un año en este simposio y en la relación, el impacto posible de Kantor en las escenas argentinas y polacas, y es Małgorzata quien va a moderar esta mesa que incluye a otros dos grandes y prestigiosísimos colegas. Por un lado, a Małgorzata Paluch-Cybulska, quien es la directora del Museo Kantor en el espacio del Centro de Documentación Cricoteka en Cracovia, gran especialista en la obra de Tadeusz Kantor, y Jarosław Lubiak, quien es otro gran historiador y curador de arte moderno y contemporáneo internacional, que el 4 de noviembre asume la dirección del Museo Nacional de
Szczecin.
en el norte de Polonia. Pero es Małgorzata, como dije, quien va a moderar. Simplemente quería darles la más cálida bienvenida. Muchas gracias a los tres. Es un honor para todos nosotros escucharlos esta mañana, así que muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Victoria, por la introducción y es un honor grande para mí y para nosotros para estar aquí y estar parte de ese gran evento, de ese simposio. Muchas gracias. Yo voy a hablar inglés por dos razones. La primera es que mi español no es tan bueno, me parece, para hacer la presentación y llevar toda la mesa, sí, redonda, sí, toda la moderación. Y la otra es que nosotros vamos a hablar en inglés, pero hay esos, yeah, we have these devices if anybody needs, and it will be more practical. Sería más práctico. So thank you again for the invitation. We are here thanks to Victoria Norton, the directora del museo, and we really owe to Victoria and to the fantastic museum team a lot in terms of this symposium, a lot of inspiration, and also a lot of work you put to organize this event, Victoria, and I also need to mention Agustina Vizcara, and good angel of this. Of this meeting, and also our coming here was possible thanks to the support of Adam Mickiewicz Institute in Poland and the Polish Embassy in Buenos Aires, whose representative Ursula Krokiewicz is here with us. Thank you. And yeah, we would like to, we were really caught by yesterday, by the presentations of yesterday, but also the program of the museum and the exhibitions that we have already seen, and some study visits and meeting artists here, which was started to be possible last days. And so we really would love to contribute to the discussion on the place of the theater, the crossover between theater, performative arts and visual arts, with our panel on Tadeusz Kantor. And we would be also very interested to hear your opinions, your thoughts, and to really have a round table discussion. So we also are here to share our thoughts and ideas and knowledge, but also to learn from you. So thank you for this opportunity. I hope we will have exciting discussion at the end of this panel and the whole day. The structure of our presentations and discussions will be like this. We thought that Małgorzata Paluch-Cybulska, who is one of the best really specialists in Tadeusz Kantor in Poland and not only, and we also owe her a lot in terms of facilitating our research and sharing knowledge. So thank you, Małgorzata. So we thought that it would be very helpful to have a short panorama to understand the background of the Tadeusz Kantor notions and ideas for both theater and visual arts that he constructed. And then Jarosław will take a look on the role of repetition as a device for creating memory through the analysis of Kantor plays. And I will take a closer look to Kantor's idea of the object, which I think is not necessarily an object, maybe rather a thing, and maybe it will cast a little bit of new light or give us a new angle to take a look at contemporary art practices. Okay, so without more talking too much, Małgorzata, over to you.
Thank you very much, Małgosia. Thank you very much for inviting me to take part in the symposium today in Buenos Aires. I'm really proud to introduce you to Tadeusz Kantor's creation. So let's start. Tadeusz Kantor was one of the top creators of the 20th century. He made a mark on the history of Polish art as an uncompromising avant-garde artist. He also had an important effect on global culture as a creator exploring new ways in theater and visual art. He was a total artist who combined various artistic disciplines: painting, sculpture, drawing, theater, scenography, visual art, performance art, and art theory. In his interdisciplinary work, all areas worked together to make a full artistic project. It all culminated in the Cricoteka theater, an experimental group that revolutionized global avant-garde theater. His work is a coherent statement, consistently developed in the next stages. It deals with the surrounding reality, memory, death, identity, and the human condition. An important time for the artist's work was right after he finished the Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow. During the German occupation, he founded the undergrounded independent theater, where he staged two works that are canonical to Polish culture. It was done in private flats, in a situation of danger, in secret, in hiding, and against the rules. These performances were an original commentary on the individual's condition in the face of historical atrocities. The compulsion to create in the face of destruction and risk, as well as in the shadow of catastrophe, became essential determinants of all his following visual and theoretical works. As the artist said, The war rejected all principles of aesthetics and philosophy. The deformation and shattering of form, the aesthetics of remnants, ruins, and repetition, attracted Kantor's special interest throughout his career. What was doomed to generation and loneliness became a tool of creation for the artist. At the same time, in the material sphere, such as the idea of the poor object or reality of the lowest rank, and in the mental sphere, being on the border, in between, using understandment, anxiety, contradiction, aura. Kantor used to say, the time of war and the lords of the world caused him lose his trust in the old image of man which had been perfectly formed. Therefore, the human figure, both in theater and painting, was constantly questioned, deformed, and mutilated by him. Kantor augmented human figures with objects, creating amorphous hybrids, bio-objects, creations in which the human figure and the object form a homogeneous unit. Kantor, through his war experience and the social changes he saw later that limited individuality in life and art, chose not to create for aesthetic reasons. Art was to be determined by existential consensus. After World War II, he worked as a theater set designer, actively participating in the Polish artistic community, for example, as a part for the Second Krakow group. He traveled abroad both as a scholarship holder and an artist exhibiting his works in prestigious galleries in Europe and the United States. Undeterred by the reality of the East and West separated by the Iron Curtain, he brought back to Poland the artistic trends that had inspired him during his travels. They included Cubism, abstract art, art in formal ready-mades, and conceptualism. In doing so, he set the tone for Polish modern art. In 1955, Kantor founded the Cricoteka. It initially served as a field for his syncretic experimental fascinations, straddling the visual and performing arts. During this period, until the mid-70s, the director mainly drew on the writings or pre-war icon of the Polish avant-garde, Stanisław Ignacy Witkiewicz. I mean the performances like The Cuttlefish, In a Small Manor House, The Madman and the Nun, The Water Hen, Lovelace and Dowdies. The following premieres were accompanied by the artist's manifestos, which expressed his own concepts of theater drawn directly from the visual arts. The informal theater used artists' experience of action painting, emphasizing formlessness on stage, the merging of actors and costumes into an amorphous mass. The Zero Theater emerged at a time when Kantor was interested in conceptualism, the displacement of reality from the fiction, and the juxtaposition of live actors with machines and objects, achieving comparable status on stage. The Happening Theater, in turn, relied on the actors' random actions resonating with audience reactions. It drew on Kantor's performance art, which stemmed from his fascination with Alan Kaplan's work, observed by Kantor in New York. In the mid-70s, the director introduced this form of artistic expression to Poland. He later developed it with his own performance art, commenting on political and social reality, such as The Letter, Panoramic Sea, Happening, and an anatomy lesson according to Rembrandt. Kantor's work, preceding the legendary theater of death, highlights his intense use of materiality. The artist's invention in paintings is emballage, or wrapping in French. Kantor wrapped and thus concealed everything from objects to human form. He utilized postal items such as letters, stamps, and postmarks, as well as bags, backpacks, suitcases, and fabrics. To hide everyday elements was to ennoble them, elevate them to be status of artifacts. Packaging usually protected mysterious contents, giving them meanings through careful handling and storage. Similarly, on stage, he manipulated degraded matter, creating compositions constructed from the bodies of actors. In these happenings, the artist stimulated two-way actions, emballage and de-emballage. He would hide an item under layers or clothing or packaging, followed by the vivisection of the structures. All of Kantor's field of activity were also permitted by the idea of journey. The imperative of being on the road is linked to the phenomena he observed, dictated by socio-political transformations, such as displacement, extermination, and nomadism. In his work, he highlighted it by the motif of travel bags and wanderers. The coda to Kantor's major directing career was the Theater of Death. In it, he explored the mechanism of private and collective memory, the traumas of history, and the passage of time. Kantor's most famous production, The Dead Class, is a simultaneous metaphor for the Holocaust and the impossibility of returning to childhood. The liminality of the play's character's stage existence is represented by mannequins sitting at school desks alongside the elderly actors. The artist had already achieved international fame with his earlier production. However, the global success of this particular play began his ongoing journey with the group across international festivals and guest stage on 6 continents. This project and the next ones, Wielopole, Let the Artist Die, and I Shall Never Return, are sometimes described as a theater of personal confession. With each performance, Kantor more and more used himself as a creative tool. Over time, the artist renamed his theater the Theater of Love and Death. There, he openly discussed his privacy, intimacy, fears, condition, and the feeling of impending death. At the same time, he returns to figuration and, in his final series of paintings, depicts himself as a symbiotic complement to his plays. The final years of Kantor's work were a time when he took stock of his life and artistic career. Looking back on his journey, he synthesized and returned to key moments. In this process, much attention was given to thinking about protecting his legacy, including the Cricoteka Center he founded. The artist designed a method to store his collection, securing his very rich archive for future generation of researchers. He authorizes a shift in the status of his theoretical objects. They are to be treated as sculptures, independent art installations, and thus shown at exhibitions as museum pieces. He prepared his last performance, Today is My Birthday, with the thought in mind that he will not be in it. In the final phase of rehearsals, 4 days before his death, he introduced a scene of his own funeral, and then he actually died. Death, so often evoked in his work, became a permanent part of his oeuvre. The actors decided to show the play to an international audience as a final for the artist's work. In Polish painting, Kantor was an innovative and change-sensitive artist. He created several thousand works of art, kept in a public and private collections worldwide. Today, prices for Kantor's paintings at art auctions are enormous and constantly rising. However, it is his work in theater that is undeniably revolutionary. The phenomenon of his work is constantly analyzed and confronted with new methodologies. It seems, however, that there are at least two crucial areas. Kantor freed himself from illusion, mimesis, and attachment to the framework of dramatic text. All this to construct plays during rehearsals with a relatively permanent ensemble of actors, mostly amateurs. Kantor revolutionized the traditional approach to acting and the action of a play. He emphasized the creation and then the presentation of a theatrical work as process. Kantor's presence on stage was crucial in this process. He was a conductor resonating with the emotions of together actors and audience. It is worth recalling here the activity that emerged on the margins of Kantor's mainstream theatrical work. They were usually realized outside the Cricottu framework, called them Cricotages. These were short performance art forms produced from 1978 until the end of Kantor's career, such as Where Are the Snows of Yesteryear and Machine of Love and Death. In these activities, Kantor, mostly with groups of acting students, reworked the current stages of his artistic work, experimenting with motifs taken from the visual arts, mainly painting. This non-mainstream activity placed Kantor as a pedagogue and opened him to more unconventional forms. This second distinctive area is the deeply hidden emotionalism of Kantor's theatrical expression. The artist had the ability to create universal concepts that resonated deeply with audiences, regardless of their status, knowledge, or language. His productions fascinated audiences across the globe, despite being immersed in Polish realities and replete with the author's personal references. This was because the artist's plays used a clear language of references, drawing on universal cultural toposes. They mesmerized audiences with the expressiveness of their means, including the uniqueness of Kantor's painterly imagination, active within the space of the theater, and particularly appreciated by theater theorists and practitioners. The universal nature of Kantor's work remains compelling to this day, particularly in the material traces of his play, in the form of preserved objects, costumes, and theatrical props. This is one of the reasons why we gather today to discuss the relevance of the artist's legacy 35 years after his death. The universality of Kantor's work resonated strongly during two performances of the Cricottu Theater plays at the San Martin Theater in Buenos Aires. The first one, Wielopole, Wielopole, was shown in September 1984, shortly after the fall of the military dictatorship in Argentina. The other one, Let the Artist Die, followed in August 1987. processing of difficult memories and past traumas present in both plays resulted in a powerful public reception. They answer to the call for theater that resonates with the audience's intelligence and sensibility. Although Kantor's work often explore depth, references to universal history and contradictions, the individual human versus mass movements and ideologies, his theater was not political in an agitational sense. In Argentina, around the same concepts, much greater tensions were generated, and the ideas of the poor object or the reality of the lowest strong gained much greater significance in a completely different social cultural context and in discussions about Argentina's recent past. Thank you very much.
Okay, I hope it will be easier to place our discussion or some questions that might arise in such a rich and broad panorama, very short one, but of Kantor's works and ideas. Thank you very much. Jarosław, over to you.
So to ask for the presentation. In the meantime, I would like to thank you, first of all, to Victoria Nordholm for initiating the whole situation. It was really great time that we spent on discussing and preparing different variants of the project that finalized in our meeting today. Thank you, Victoria. It was really great to talk to you for the last year and a half, I guess. And thank you also to Agustina Vizcara for organizing our trip here, and Fernando Garcia for organizing the conference. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here. Really, it's not just kindness, it's a real feeling for me. So I will talk a little bit about the memory in Kantor, because it's somehow interesting for me, and I guess I want to share with you some thoughts on it. Because the initial feeling I got when I'm getting always when I'm watching the films with the plays of Kantor is that there is something painful. It's painful despite all the black humor and grotesque moments that often occur in the plays, and perhaps. This pain comes from that I feel that I'm trapped in a nightmare that isn't mine. On the other hand, there is something mesmerizing in the experience he offers to us, and for me it is the courage and bravery with which he returns to his childhood. I would never dare to do it myself, you know. So definitely there is something great in this, and this regression starts from the strange event and a kind of uncanny encounter that happens in the village in the vacation time. Kantor recalls it as follows: it was 1971 or 1972, the seaside, a small village, one street, small pool, one-story houses, and one, possibly the poorest of them all, a school building. It was summer, the school was empty and deserted. There was only one classroom in it. It was possible to peek into it through dirty, dust-covered windows placed very low. They gave the impression that the school had sunk into the ground. My face was glued to the window for a long time and peeked into the dark interior of my muddled memory. Again, I was a little schoolboy in a poor country school. I was sitting at the desk, which was covered with the graffiti that had been carved into it with a knife, and turning the pages of a book, my fingers covered with free ink. Today, I know that something important happened at that window. I made an important discovery. With an incredible clarity, I became aware of the existence of memory. In our rational universe, memory is a recollection of the past, has never been given prominence, has never really mattered in cold-blooded dealings with reality. This is the end of quotation. So something happens. He's in a certain situation. There is a certain scene. Kantor looks through the window and becomes a schoolboy. He feels this transformation in his body. He feels organic presence of memory. The last sentence of the quotation reveals a sense of awkwardness felt by the avant-garde artist as he faces the unexpected intrusion of his own history. The history he thought he had overcome and left behind him. It took him 3 to 4 years to reshape this encounter with the past into the dead class. We may see the dead class as the first stage his regression to childhood. What is crucial for us here, I believe, is the spatiality of the regression, or to be more precise, the spatial characteristic or status of the places he created while returning to the past. And this is how he commented the issue. School desks are always in a classroom, but it was not a classroom real place. It was a black hole, a void, in front of which the whole auditorium started. The space becomes a hole or a void in the dead class. Then the next stage of this regression to childhood was a room of his childhood in Wielopole. I think this picture from Vauxhall Gallery show perfectly presents this idea of in a very synthetical, purified form in the white cube of the gallery. So we have only 3 elements that creates the room, actually, right? And he commented on this as follows, quote, "It is difficult to define the spatial dimension of memory. Here there is a room of my childhood with all its inhabitants. The room cannot be a real space. It cannot be a real room. If we take into consideration the audience, the room could not possibly be perceived as an intimate room of a childhood, but as a public forum. There is also another reason. The room cannot be real. That is, exists in our time because this room is in our memory, in our recollection of the past. So this Kantor and the Wielopole. The final stage of his regression to childhood was a poor room of his imagination. In today is my birthday. And he decided to recreate or reinstage his own room. So he commented, quote, "I have decided to move in and live on stage. I have here my bed, my table, my chair, and of course my paintings. I have often imagined my room in a theater, inside of the theater, on stage, rather than in a hotel. So my, as I call it, pool room of imagination is placed on stage. It's placed on stage, I say. I have to rearrange it, end of quotation. And he did arrange it just before his death, and it was his pool room of imagination. And we can somehow organize the spaces of Kantor's regression to his childhood into a kind of matrix. As we remember, when Kantor saw the village classroom, he was shocked by an encounter with memory. The encounter opened up a void or a hall that was filled with apparitions he thought had been gone for a long time. It was an experience of estrangement or defamiliarization. Later, step by step, play by play, he started to domesticate and familiarize the memory. And finally, the memory, or more precisely, the memory works became his home. What was evolving in this process was the effective status of the place, Kantor's emotional relationship with it. But what about the spatial status? A void or a hole is a negation of any spatial characteristic. It is not supposed to be any physical site. In a way, the very spatiality of this or that room, where the performance was staged, was irrelevant. It is more akin to a mental space for encountering the past, and it stays the same to the very last play. Kantor, just before his death, wants to move in or to accommodate in the mental space of memory his new home. In one place, from the dead class to today is my birthday, specific spatiality is erased and negated. All the performance took place in a void that played the function of rooms, different rooms. In spatial terms, the room is defined not by its physicality, but what happens within it. Space emerges from a particular situation. We could call this special kind of space a scene, following the psychoanalytic term of primal scene as a site, real or imaginary, physical, symbolic, where something happens, the site of an event. And following the meaning of phrases like crime scene or accident scene, we can speak of memory scene in Kantor. This is the site where memory can reveal itself as an event in all its radicality. And what happens in Kantor's memory scene is foremost repetition. Kantor began exploring the question of repetition as early as in the 1930s in Balladina. He developed it into one of his tools of dismantling traditional art and theater, as well as for creating new avant-garde practices. Quite paradoxically, the repetition he theorized and practiced in his art can be compared with concepts of bare repetition in Gilles Deleuze and definitely repetition in Félix Guattari. However, Kantor developed his concept of repetition quite independently, I believe. And Deleuze wrote, quote, "Modern life is such that confronted with the most mechanical, the most stereotypical repetitions inside and outside ourselves, we endlessly extract from them little differences, variations and modifications." And he distinguished this mechanical, physical, bare repetition from a disguised or clothed one. Similarly, Guattari distinguished mechanistic, empty or deathly repetition from a creative one. The most striking paradox here is that Kantor employed bare deathly repetition in his early art. And then when he began to work with memory and what he called the theater of death, he moved towards disguised or creative repetitions. Furthermore, he didn't stop only with them. So just to briefly analyze how he used this kind of disguised repetition, how he created his memory scenes through complex mechanisms of disguised creative repetition, and just let me to enumerate them actually. So it is recurrence of the situation, and in the dead class doubling, he was kind of obsessed with this idea of double. We have the doubling of the word in Wielopole, the name of the village. We have these twin brothers, we have a priest and his dummy, a bride and her dummy, so the dummy functions as this kind of double. We have also multiple reiteration of gestures, words, actions, and activities through which he constructs his plays, perseverations of musical motifs and song fragments, reiterations of motifs from culture and art in a modified form like Last Supper, Crucifixion, Velázquez's Infanta. Finally, he also quoted himself from his earlier plays and works, so it was the way that the object and figures were constantly returning in his plays. And, last but not least, he reenacted traumatic events. And we can see this like recurrence of situations in the dead class. The twin brothers and prison and dummy in the Wielopole. And the reiterations of motifs from culture to art in modified form, like Last Supper and then the Crucifixion in Wielopole, and of course famous Infanta of Velázquez, reappropriated by Kantor, and the example of restaging or reenacting traumatic events is the shooting of soldiers in a grotesque form in Wielopole again. So discovering the kind of repetition we can call disguise or largely did not exhaust Kantor's development in research on memory mechanism. To recognize the results, we need to follow interpretation submitted by one of the researchers. Noel Witz, while analyzing rehearsals of videos of Kantor, proposed an astonishing metaphor to describe the process. He writes, quote, What emerges as a mixture of images and ideas work on the rehearsal that are like a series of brush strokes on a canvas until the relations are clear and evoke what Kantor wants the spectator to receive. And later, the rehearsal process with Kantor therefore was much like the experience of a painter filling his canvas with images, some of which might be retained, some disregarded, some altered or extended. It was therefore essentially a process of suggestion and improvisation, although Kantor loved that word. So Witz compares him to the painter who composes images, actions, situations. The stage would be his canvas. Kantor's memory scene becomes a fourth-dimensional canvas. So I propose to see it as a plane of composition, so we skip 2 dimensions on this. And this will allow us to find and analyze compositional patterns he used to create his shows. And by patterns, I understand here the disposition of actors and objects on the stage and the trajectories of the movements. Thanks to this, we can somehow trace the system of traces, find the system of traces. Yeah? So, to come quickly through the system, we can notice that there are some, like, the composition that could be called swarm of lock. And this is like seemingly random distribution of elements on the canvas, the stage is a canvas, the line, the triangle, and of course, circling. That's another way. So I think that we can find also another models if you look closely. So if you are coming for tonight screenings, we can all try to find the patterns if you find it somehow playful, let's say. But finally, I guess we could even find this pattern, the way how people or things move through the stage, scribble. But the most important for the whole time, I believe, was the circling. It was the most powerful and meaningful compositional pattern. It usually functions as a culmination of an act, part, or even the whole. It is a moment of unity among the elements of the play as they come together in a joint action. And this is finally the moment when repetition, I believe, manifests itself as a fundamental mechanism of memory, history, and our relation to the past. It is also a potent metaphor for natural or historical cycles, eternal return, and indeed for a vicious circle. So I didn't invent the pattern, I have to admit, because these compositional patterns can be found in the system of traces that Arnold Stern invented, calling it formulation. And actually, I would like to propose using this formulation as a tool for analyzing and interpreting Kantor's plays. And Stern developed his idea over the case of his collaboration with children of different ages, including adult ones. So I think this is perfect tool to analyze the story of regression to childhood. Yes, that Kantor tried to somehow survive. So Stern created a practice called a plate of painting that in his mind has nothing to do with art. So for Stern, plate of painting has nothing to do with art. He sees it more as absolute freedom of expression gained through liberating spontaneity. So Stern even after years of practice, he noticed that if the plane of painting is truly spontaneous, it sooner or later reveals stable patterns of expression. And he called them traces and grouped them into three categories: primary figures, object images, and essential figures. I will not go into details because also this right row is kind of analysis of space that appears through the plate of painting. But the very process of painting is structured by repetition and evolution. For children or individuals involved, constant repetition is a way of satisfying internal needs and uncovering memories that have not even been remembered. Instead of being unconsciously remembered, those memories are inscribed, Stern believes, in the human body during the process of biological development. And Stern calls it organic memory. In strictly controlled and supported circumstances, in complete isolation from external disturbances, the play of painting leads those who participate regularly to discover their own organic memory. Expressing internal impulses and satisfying internal needs is accompanied by feelings of intense enjoyment, a sense of belonging, fulfillment, even bliss and happiness. One may say that this is a way to reconnect with one's individual history and the collective body of species, and perhaps even the entire organic world. Stern argues that every person involved discover in their own way the same system of traces, and he calls this called the formulation. So we have two spaces of creating memory. Yeah? We can juxtapose Kantor's memory scene as a space for discovering the past with Arnold Stern's Clolier or Malor, the space for unifying with organic memory. Tadeusz Kantor moved from the bare repetition to disguise of creative repetition, right? However, he never transformed deathly repetition in a lively one. Kantor confronts us with deathly repetition, and the radicalism of his work lies in locking himself and us in the deadness of this repetition, I believe. This is why watching the films of his plays is painful. At the level of representation, now what we see in the performances, Kantor reaches the limit of conscious memory. And he attempts to transcend these boundaries by triggering process of decay to extract unconscious content, introducing us to the nightmares of his individual unconscious. At the level of compositional patterns and performance, however, he achieves something more. He enters the sphere of what Arnold Stern called organic memory. Regression to childhood leads him to activate the dynamic similar to formulation, although its meaning remains and must remain hidden from him. He stands on the threshold of organic memory, using its primal figures, but he's unable to cross this threshold to reach organic unity. This does not happen even when he finds his home in the poor room of our imagination on the theatrical stage. Arnold Stern emphasizes that formulation has nothing to do with art, let me correct this. And Kantor, as an artist, explores the sources of memory using artistic tools, including accidentality, borrowed mostly from surrealism. Accidentality is the key to his creative method. Meanwhile, as Stern stresses, to grasp formulation, one must precisely distinguish between accidentality and spontaneity. Only spontaneous play of paintings allows for the liberation of expression. In contrast, Kantor insisted on exploring accidentality through improvisation to give form to his memory. So, to summarize. So staring in or staring at the hell of accidentally may describe Kantor's struggle with memory. Accidentality governs how the past returns to him in its endless repetitions. The repetitive structure reenacts traumatic experiences through art. Recent research in social psychology shows how trauma may be inherited through generations. Michał Milewicz, in his recently published book, whose title may be translated as Trauma Land, Poles in the Shadow of the Past, demonstrates how Polish culture remains shaped by the trauma of the World War II. Tadeusz Kantor's theater of memory sustained this shadow of the past. It was actually the theater of shadows. And this is clear from a very first glance. It is a washed out and colorless realm of apparitions and specters that not only haunt us but also keep us imprisoned in a stubborn circulation. We are trapped in a vicious circle of repetition. However, in Kantor's art, only one little step separates us from organic memory. And the open question is whether we can do it by ourselves, whether we can develop Kantor's work to transcend it, and leave the trauma land. And obviously, Poland is not the only country that can describe itself as trauma land. I don't have it here, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think there will be a lot of space for questions and discussion to this. And yes, please don't feel discouraged to come to the screenings this night and tomorrow and to have this painful experience yourself, like test it, how much you can identify with it or not. And we can discuss it maybe tomorrow too. My presentation, if I may ask for putting in on a screen, it's somehow which is interesting, will to some extent relate to what Jarosław, to some theses or ideas that Jarosław shared, although we didn't speak much about our presentations. So it's also interesting how it's possible to arrive to some similar conclusions. And also one word of explanation to why I've chosen the topic dancing with the thing, contemporary art through Kantor's lens. It was very much inspired by our conversations that we had with Victoria for really many months, thinking about some more some extensive project inspired by Kantor, but also wondering on how he might be like echoed in the contemporary art practices in Argentina and in Poland. And what struck me was like the more we were getting acquainted with contemporary art practices here in Argentina, so the more we were finding them parallel to many Polish performative and visual art practices, and it really took me to the question why, and what is the core, because and what is the hidden relation to my understanding and my knowledge to Kantor's object. So, how did Tadeusz Kantor define an object? I will make some close reading of excerpts of his texts on the objects, and it's also on his understanding of the role of the object in his art and how it started. Then what was the trajectory of the object, his own approach, but then of using it also in his both visual arts and theater, because they mutually fueled each other. It's really like sometimes hard to separate, right? What was initiated by what, or what was first in some instances. So I will make a close reading of some excerpts of his several excerpts from Tadeusz Kantor texts, his typescripts from Cricoteka archives, from the years 1986-88, and it's also interesting. It was also interesting for me that to find out how he also tried to maybe recapitulate or rewrite or like come back to his attitudes from the past in the 80s and grasp them. I will also take a closer look to his vocabulary, his using when speaking about the object and the trajectory that the object is going through in his artistic practice. And then I will try to define the thing, which comes in the title. And let's see if through the thing and thingness we can build the bridge to the contemporary art practices and to understand why the Polish and Argentinian ones, although these artistic scenes through last decades didn't have much in common, right? They didn't physically have many opportunities to speak to each other, to exchange. Why in so many moments they seem so like strikingly similar. So I will come back for a second to one of the first plays of Tadeusz Kantor, The Return of Odysseus, that Małgorzata was also mentioning. It happened in 1944. And that was his second play organized in the underground theater he was running in Nazi-occupied Krakow, in Nazi-occupied Poland. And what struck me was his comment to the use of objects and how and why they constructed the reality of this very play. Born in almost at the end of war, but you could say still in the middle of this traumatic experience. So he stated that the war turned the world into a tabula rasa. The world became close to death. So the world and death were started to be like a synonymous for him, and so he was marking kind of time break, the end of what we used to know, the end of world that he used to know. The set design he described like a remnant of civilization washed up on the shore of this crumbling reality. So you can like see it and read it also from his own memories, like leftovers, ruins, or decay, and washed away, washed up, yeah. In his further practice in theater. And to the figure of Odysseus, whom we see here at first glimpse, he might look like a thing, like an object rather than a person. He says he presented itself as a shapeless, misshapen mass, literally. It is not clear if what it is turned away, shriveled, joined with the objects. So it also struck me, like knowing Kantor's some of his plays, but also artworks, how prophetic it was this figure of Odysseus also to his further practice, and also marking a loss of subjectivity. Kantor on what he wrote literally on the first apparition of an object that he incorporated into the set design of this play was, "We played with death, not in cabaret, but at every turn, day and night. I want to convey the situation and the moment of the year 1944 when I took an object from the reality of life and gave it the status of work of art. A muddy wheel from a country cart and a rotten board from a fence. It was hanging under the ceiling, and there were more broken objects taken from the reality constituting the whole set design and surrounding of the play. Back then, in 1944, my object had one feature, my own, the mark of poverty. Nothing aesthetic. Later in 1963, I called it on the threshold of the trash can, between the trash can and eternity. If it weren't for that poverty, it would have remained an ordinary ennoblement of an object to the height of an art monument, a monument of art. I despised it in those terrible years of war. I was very concerned about poverty, to keep it. Poverty was to become for a long time and perhaps forever the content of my art. So, and maybe I should also say that I tried to keep the writing and the typing of Kantor, and only the bolts come from me to help navigate through the text. So that was 1944, and after the war, as also my colleague Małgorzata was mentioning, he went into informal painting, so beautifully and amazingly represented here in the collection of the museum. He also had his informal period, but he wrote about it. He also he treated it as a kind of his traumatic expression. I call the period of informal art a descent into hell, into infernum. The external objective world disappeared and another one opened up before me. But this infernum belonged to our age, in which our inner selves had become hell. The painting simply became a secretion of my inner self. After a few years, I had enough of myself, and I began to think about returning. I asked if it was possible for Orpheus to return to our world. Unfortunately, there are no returns. So we see very clearly that in the 50s, he understood that there is really a deep break in time, in his lifetime, and also in the world he used to know. On the end of the 50s and the beginning of the 60s, he said about that time, in the 58, 60, 66, 63, I acted largely instinctively under pressure from a necessity that was unknown to me at that time. So he says something was urging him, some kind of necessity to do what? To look for an object again, for the first time since 1944. Then the old wave returned, the time of the object, that something that exists at the opposite pole of my consciousness, myself, inaccessible. And this attempt at all costs for centuries to touch it, the object that was deeply embedded in me, was not now speaking insistently and promisingly. I had to do something with it. I knew well that the traditional representation, its image, would not return. Yeah, so he says that the very possibility of representation is lost. Yeah, and that it was only a reflection, the reflection of the object hidden inside of him. And the object still existed, untouched. Still that moon and its side, invisible. Can you see something from the invisible side? Does such a side exist? The unseen, invisibility. Make it invisible, hide it, pack it up. So this is how he came to emballage. Through this internal dialogue with himself and this kind of obsession that apparently, according to his writings from the 80s, he got on the object. So he says again, he didn't want memories. He wasn't even ready for them. The memories, meaning the horror and the word nothing, the word death. So he wanted to cut out memories, and the only way to relate to them was through an object, but from the packed object, hidden object, the first emballage. And this is also how Kantor describes the difference between his emballages and those from, in French art, European art, and here, I guess in the very same time, that it was his struggle with approaching the object, that's something inside, embedded in the depths of his self. So he started with bags, poor bags, and he wanted like to hide. He also uses words like to protect objects, to secure them, to cover them. And he says to take it away from mundane everyday life, from reality, which compared to the rich imagination remains poor. So again, the representation against what he thought or he believed was not a representation. I'm arriving to an end of these quotations, but it's also interesting what he says. I brutally nailed messy paper bags from rubbish bins, crumpled, crushed to the impeccably pure canvas of my paintings, like they have been rare butterflies. It also like struck me like how you can brutally name rare butterfly. He says about the bags, tortured, decrucified, captured bags. The close and careful reading of these fragments of his typescript, it really struck me the vocabulary that he's using and these adjectives and expressions to describe the object, like that's something that exists at the opposite pole of my consciousness. Nothing. Yeah, so like that, something, nothing. It's inaccessible, invisible, deeply embedded in me, myself. It's poor, tortured, decrucified, captured. But what interested me even more was the verbs that he was using to describe his relationship to the object, his approach. He wanted to keep it, to hide it, to touch it, to avoid. He was afraid to do that. He wanted to replace it, and finally to brutally nail it. What struck me was that he was kind of like dancing around this, what he called objects, and trying to come closer to them, desiring them, but then running away from them with a kind of repulsion. But I also checked what he was like doing with the objects, or what the objects were doing, or how they were performing in his practice. First, it's important to say here, to also state and underline that he understood emballage as a process, as an activity, not as an object at the end. It was a procedure, an activity, provocative presence of the object. So how he started to use these objects also in theater practice was introducing emballage, what also Małgorzata said, to his plays, designing this kind of costumes that actors were wearing. And what the object was, or the objects he designed, what they started to do is not only to cover actors, but also in this very play from the 63, The Madman and the Nun, this machine of folded chairs which he constructed, it was like it kind of started to live with its own life, like trying to occupy the most of the stage possible, enabling the actors to really play their roles, and like competing with them on the stage. And then he came to the idea of the bio-object since the 70s. He started to use this term. And he said actors were genetically connected to this object. They created a kind of functioning bio-object, secreting a tissue of quite a special action. And it's also interesting, you can see here that it's a mutual relationship. And both the object and the actors, they were like efficient. They were sorry, missing the word. Okay, they. Nie, sprawczy. Oh, okay. Without the, he says, without the actors, this object would have been a dilapidated wreck, incapable of functioning. On the other hand, the actors were conditioned by it. Their roles and actions derived from it. Yeah, so they depended on each other. And he even says, you see Wielopole here again from Paris, not from Buenos Aires, but he used the same costumes and set design. He says the matter of the show, Wielopole, was created by the inner life of the object, its characteristics, its destiny, its imaginary area. The actors became its living parts, its organs. They were as if genetically united with that object. They created a certain bio-object which acted and secreted the plot of a rather special action. So I made some simple drawing to summarize this trajectory of Kantorian object. So first in 44, he claims it was this something that came from nothing. Yeah. From the unspeakable, the realm of the unspeakable experience. So in 44, well, we might say there was a first appearance of the object. Then he left it to do to experiment on different fields than that, and with the emballage. He started hiding the object, then covering actors with it. Then the object was trying to get rid of the actors from the stage. And at the end, with the idea of bio-object, it started to hybridize with actors. So slowly coming to some conclusions or some thoughts, at least. The object or the thing. I must say, I really couldn't resist, through analysis of the language he was using, I couldn't resist the connecting Kantor's thinking and practicing the presence of the object. I couldn't stop resist the comparison to the wheel, according to Jacques Lacan, and couldn't resist this psychoanalytical idea or the reading of his text. Yeah. So if we have in mind his this dance around the object that he's doing, to keep it, to hide it, touch, not touch, avoid, afraid, replace, and also the names he uses for it: something, nothing, myself, opposed to the rational part, the dark side of the moon, invisible and inaccessible. So if you read one of the possible definitions of the wheel, how Jacques Lacan understands it and defines it, something that cannot be symbolized, and which is excluded from the symbolic realm and excluded from the network of signifiers, that construct over reality, excluded also from conceptual understanding. Nevertheless, it exists under the name of trauma, in the form of trauma. It's a limit of representative power. Yeah, that's why he repeats that this is nothing, this is something. He doesn't want to come back to it, to touch it. But in the same time, this is the void around which all speech revolves. But what happens if we if we overlap, if we impose on Lacanian concept and Lacanian think to some point, the contemporary theories on think theory, one of the main representatives of which is Bill Brown, who writes in his quite recent think theory, we begin to confront the thingness of objects when they stop working for us. The story of objects asserting themselves as things, then, is the story of a changed relationship to the human subject, and thus the story of how the thing really names less an object than a particular subject-object relation. And on this reading of the thing and thingness, I imposed or overlapped my quite recent finding, thanks to Patricio Regena, thank you, and the visit to the collection of Museo Moderno, an artist I must say I didn't know before, and I was really caught by his very unique thinking, developed in a very same time that Kantor was struggling in communist regime Poland with his Second World War traumas. So he explains the thing as, I think of the thing as a transcending an object lived by man, penetrated and even modified by his passion-filled plundering examinations. It is coming into being of the object. And also, which was also interesting for me was that this very object coming from the Museo Moderno collection is called Ego Cosa. So it's so also like organically hybridized with the very subject of the artist himself. So Kantor's think, and I'm slowly arriving to my final slides. Kantor's think, the broken object, what he calls an object, seems to be a material equivalent of his trauma, war experiences, and a clear rupture of the symbolic order which this trauma produced. It is like a trace of his memory. But also the process full of tensions between the unconscious and the ego coming into being of an object which is never ending, which is never fulfilled, it's never successful. So he seems to be dancing around not so much the object as he claimed, but around the thing, or with it, or as a part of the thingness process. So the thingness and contemporary art, this is more a question than a statement. But I really find it not only in Cosa of Rubens and Saint-Antonin, but also in the dear invisible host of our Casa Heredia, Alberto Heredia. So the question, there are a lot of questions brought by the possible thingness theory. What does it mean? How does it relate to both personal traumas and those on the social level produced by the oppression of the system? Or how much or how deeply it is linked, or how we can rewrite our understanding of bio-object and thingness of death, or the body inside out, the overwhelming body, the bio-object. or with the Polish artist Katarzyna Kozyra, the thingness and strangeness of the body. Oh, sorry. Where is the place of the symptom in it, or the truth in it? The hybridized body, the bio-object relating with the other, with human and non-human other. Is the thickness of contemporary art a possible tool in a survival kit in the face of old and new traumas in a quickly changing world? So this is the question I hope we'll continue to elaborating with Victoria and the team. Thank you. So we were really, I'm afraid, speaking a little bit longer than the schedule allows. Sorry for that, and thank you for your patience to our presentations. Maybe I would just start with, maybe you have any comments, or you don't agree with something, or would like to ask any questions. Any kind of questions is welcome. So may I maybe first open our round table to this part of the table. Yeah, okay.
Do you think that the process of which an object becomes a thing, it's reversible?
Wow, this is a very good question. Maybe for the next presentation somewhere. I believe I'm really very much inspired by the writings of Ruben Saint-Antonin, so recently discovered by me, and I kind of identify with his also understanding of the object that is really separated from us. We don't have a relationship. So maybe, this is a good question, of course, and a very interesting one. Thank you for this. But if you reverse this process, it means you have no relation to this object anymore. Yeah. So it's it disappears. It's from the scope of your experience, or your seeing, from the field of what you perceive, are able to perceive what's important for you, what constitutes your words. So if we stick to this meaning of artworks and this differentiation between object and things, so I now understand better after this work with Kantor that I did for this presentation, and why the works that are things really move me and touch me somehow, and establish some kind of a deeper relationship.
So maybe I think that from theoretical point of view, it's very easy. Always when you put a thing into a situation of utility or commodity, it becomes an object, and this thingness is lost. Yes, I think indeed when we look at the art object, this is very, pulsating relation because we would like to think about art objects as about things, but they easily turn into objects so I think the thing is based on, first of all, on a kind of affective relation, with pain, love, erotic, whatever, An object is mostly this kind of utilitarian situation. We use it, we leave it, we throw it away when we don't need it anymore. In that sense, you cannot throw away the thing because it's part of you in a sense. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Victoria.
First, I want to really thank you because I think this has been such a generous panel. I am sure everyone in the audience agrees. I want a book published about this panel because every one of the three presentations has been so in-depth, and I think we all here in the audience take a lot to think about. So first, a deep expression of gratitude. And then I'm very amazed also by the question that was posed from our team. I'm very touched by this activation, let's say, of the object, as you name it, Margot, but thinking of Małgorzata's first presentation of how you bring the existential to Kantor and this deep embodiment of his life, you know, in his work, and what it meant for him to really bring his life experience through the works and the plays and the stages. And then Jarosław, you know, you speaking about this movement to regression and childhood and trying to find a space, you know, because all these traces in a way are trying to understand a position in space, and then Margot bringing us from the thing to the object, and we are becoming to ask ourselves what are we done by or made of. And I think you brought so many questions, so it's more a sense of gratitude on behalf of hopefully the audience, if everybody agrees, and also to invite further questions, but thank you more than anything.
Thank you very much. And yeah, we are here for you today and tomorrow, and we would love to have informal also discussions, having a coffee, and I guess, oh, Patricia.
Can I add one more?
Yeah, sure.
So thank you. I want to thank you all for the presentations. And I was thinking also, what's the place of the audience in these relationships with the object or with memory? What is the type of work that Kantor proposes or asks the audience to do? Because I'm guessing it's not cathartic, it's not breath. So
Yeah.
what is it asking the audience to do or offering the audience in relationship to trauma or pain?
Another very good and tough question. I don't know, Małgorzata, if you would like to know.
You are the specialist from the objects instead. So.
No, but it's a very good question, because I remember, you know, it's like we started watching these films from Kantor's plays during last months, working with you and with Victoria on the symposium, and to learn more. And I must say, like, my personal approach to them was, I knew only that class from the past. I didn't know, I must confess, the other plays, only fragments. I knew them only from fragments. And I must say that my emotional like reaction to like watching these films was of the one of repulsion. Like, I don't want to watch this, you know, it's a torture. But on the other hand, I was somehow caught by it, you know. I wanted to watch it, you know, to continue watching. And then, you know, this like close reading of Kantor's understanding of the object, and that actually we can't speak about the object, but rather about the unconscious and about the thing and thingness, and his relationship to himself and to his traumatic, trying to establish some relation to his traumatic experiences. that then I understood what's calling me in this place. The same, rejecting and calling is this traumatic core of his own experience, which of course, it's proved scientifically that you somehow inherit traumas up to the third generation. So Argentinian society is still in trauma, the Polish societies, I'm still the second or the third, how you count it? My parents were born just after the war, and of course I knew very well my grandparents and so on. So, so maybe it's this organic kind of, traumatic experience that makes me, understand this traumatic core embedded in his place. But, and it's also, it was also interesting for us to learn in the beginning of our conversations with Victoria, the impact that Kantor had here, especially to the theater, as far as I understood, yeah. And in the same time, he didn't have this impact in Poland, not to that extent. And we had these conversations like maybe decontextualizing Kantor from our, cultural and societal traumas and bringing this form and filling it up with a completely new context, make his influence here or the memory of Kantor much more lively in a way, of course, with all due respect to the Cricoteka Institute and the museum and the huge work they are doing to keep him alive, artistically and relevant, But yeah, this is, I think, this you will see yourself this night.
If I may add something, for what is striking for me when I hear about reception of Kantor in Argentina is that, in a way, he was, in Poland or elsewhere, he was never in a position of a kind of free speaking about his trauma, that all the plays are about something which cannot be spoken of. When we were introduced to the things that were happening in Argentina in the 80s, it was kind of freedom of expression, that people finally could do whatever they wanted to do. They could speak whatever they wanted to say. And it is my opinion, it was never a case of Kantor, even because in a certain way, this communist regime didn't allow people to speak about the traumas of the war or the regime itself and things like that.
So they were frozen.
So he was like kind of playing around of this thing that cannot be spoken of psychoanalytically, but also politically. And in that sense, I think that while in Poland he was like, you ask about what was the place of audience, he like somehow got them into display. And for this reason, for me, I feel trapped. Yeah, my feeling about this is that I feel trapped in this play, the game with what cannot be spoken of. So he wasn't able to give the testimony because it was kind of forbidden. Also I think on the social level, people were not ready to hear testimonies. It happened many years later in Poland, because this testimony, this telling the truth is really, it's opening the wounds, right? So it couldn't happen at his lifetime. So I believe that this was this kind of play he did, whereas it was striking for me this contrast between his position and the situation that was here in Argentina, for instance, in the 80s.
Yeah, and he was super successful abroad, extremely successful, right? Playing like hundreds of times. Mm-hmm.
Hola. ¿Cómo les va? Gracias por todo. Yo soy Natividad Martone. Quería contarles que conocí a Kantor en el Conservatorio de Arte Dramático hice mi tesis de licenciatura sobre el legado de Tadeusz Kantor en el teatro porteño de Buenos Aires. Luego hice un documental sobre Tadeusz Kantor y también un libro. En este momento tenemos un grupo, acá hay varios, de 14 artistas que estamos investigando sobre la obra de Kantor y también sobre el bioobjeto. Lo que me interesaba del bioobjeto que presentaban es que era también un bioobjeto moderno. Uno desde el arte dramático, desde nuestra investigación, nos anclamos como en el objeto que traía una historia, un objeto de más de 30, 40, 50 años que por sí mismo podría traer una historia. Y empezamos a elaborar el bioobjeto desde la pulsión dramática, de cómo se injerta ese objeto en el cuerpo y qué eso propone y cuál es la limitación que eso también tiene. Me llamó muchísimo la atención esta nueva mirada moderna del bioobjeto, de transformarlo en algo mucho más cercano, ¿no? Una labora siempre trabaja desde lo artístico, que es un gueto, es muy pequeña la gente que realmente puede entender este funcionamiento y este impacto y que pueda recibir esto. Así que para mí fue muy gratificante poder saber los recorridos y ver cómo hoy, cuando hoy un artista se encuentra, como vos decís, con toda la obra de Kantor, que no es vestigios del que uno conoce, que va por ahí, sino que realmente se puede conectar con la obra plástica, con la obra teatral. Nada, se generan estas otras cosas que de pronto con una parcialidad no se puede generar. Entonces, poder tener más información y que la obra, a través de los artistas, vaya produciendo otras obras que impactan a los nuevos artistas, me parece que es como el legado que a Kantor le hubiese gustado, porque no es sobre su trabajo, sino es sobre lo que su trabajo impacta en el nuestro. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.